Thank you, Ilyich. You can describe it exactly. How the light reflects from the warm gold, the link still smooth, how you roll it back and forth in the palm of your hand. It has been in the family for generations. You always wear it when swimming and just felt dependent before diving off the diving board. So that necklace must be somewhere at the bottom of the pool. I think many of us have experienced such a story. You have lost something valuable somewhere. But because you know it is there, you know what you are looking for, and also what it means to you, you will not rest until you find it. So even if there is nothing left to do but diving off the bottom and searching the whole pool, you will not lose heart. This is perhaps the most important condition for being able to find something. For imagine that you do not even know whether something can be found at all. Would you be willing to dive and search an entire pool? And if you don't know what you are looking for, how long will you keep looking? How can you even tell if you have found it? And if, moreover, you have no idea whether it will be worthwhile, wouldn't you give up right now? This applies equally to truth. Trusting that there is truth, that we can recognize it, and that it is worth everything is the unmissable step to finding truth. And that trust can be nothing more than a hunch at first. A feeling that something is missing in your life, sometimes a kind of restlessness. You have the idea that there must be more than just what you perceive with your senses in the material world. So we advise everyone to take this seriously. We have already concluded, on the basis of the previous lecture, that there is one truth, one boundless reality, and that we can get to know this truth more and more, or better still, become more and more aware of it and express it, because in essence we are this truth. In this lecture we will further explain how you can find truth. But this is not possible without the conviction, or at least the confidence, that this truth is there and that you are able to find it. In short, our starting point is that we have within ourselves the potential to find truth. Something you can also find in all religions and philosophies since ancient times, from east to west. For example, the famous saying, "Man, know thyself," from the Oracle of Delphi. Or this statement by Zarathustra, "For he who knows himself, knows in himself the all." But what does that imply? Because how often do we not discover that we are wrong? How often have we not been blinded by a certain conviction and later found out that things are different after all? In the previous lecture, this phenomenon has already been referred to as objective idealism. Real is that which we experience as real. And that perspective can grow. But our view of reality does not automatically widen itself. In fact, we often see people getting caught up in their own ideas and beliefs throughout life. That they are less and less surprised and become rigid in their thinking, sometimes even cynical. While, as a child, they stood in a world full of wonder, or as a young adult, they worked full of energy to realize their ideals. It is therefore important that we always remain open to a greater reality. Now there are two ways of looking at truth or reality. The first way is that you reason purely from yourself, from your own existing perception. You use that comparison again, only your image of the elephant. For you, the truth is the leg, or the ear, or the trunk. You hold on to your own conviction, to your own partial truth. And then you limit reality to what you understand or how it suits you best, and you're not open to what others say. In other words, you limit yourself to what you perceive with your senses, your feelings about the state of the world, how to work with it or around it, and thus realize the goals in your life for yourself. Think, for example, of the man of the Middle Ages who was convinced that the earth was flat, and therefore dared not to go out into the ocean for fear of falling off. You do not realize then that you have wider possibilities in yourself to experience more truth. The second way is that you start from a view of the truth or reality as something that is all-encompassing, an underlying reality that you can develop within yourself. The question here is not so much what your observations are, but what conclusions you draw from them. A perspective that grows, in fact, in collaboration with others. In short, you assume that your image of the elephant can broaden more and more. And this ensures a lasting sense of wonder. And you not only care for the well-being of yourself, but also start to have an eye for others and the greater whole of which you are part. Your sense of wonder makes you curious about the state of the world and how others experience this. It makes you identify more with others, including also the suffering they experience. And this evokes compassion, an inner appeal to help eliminate suffering. And at the same time, you ask yourself, what is truth? What is the core of everything? What is essential? And what is wise? Also, the conditions in the world are raising all kinds of questions in you. Why is it like this? What are the causes of what we see? And why are these causes there? How do things relate to each other? And what can I contribute? And you will go in search of knowledge. What do we know about the world? How is the world structured? How do we remove the causes also for suffering that we see? You are actually using 3 inner instruments in conjunction to find the truth. The first is your sense of unity. You identify yourself with an ever-increasing view of reality. And from that, as mentioned, compassion flows. And the test question here is it ethical? In other words, is what you perceive in accordance with what you know within yourself to be the right thing? With your conscience, does it align with your conscience, align with your intuition? And this corresponds with the religious in us and helps us to answer the question of what life is for. The second instrument is your awareness of connectedness and coherence, or your insight or understanding. When you see the core or essence of something, following the first instrument, then you are also able to recognize through your insight and understanding that essence always and everywhere. And the test question here is it universal? And this corresponds to the philosophical aspect in us and helps us to answer the question of the why of things. And the third is your intellect. The test question here is it logical? Here too, it is important to make a clear distinction between the facts and the conclusions you draw from those facts. Because the same facts can sometimes be explained logically in a different way. This tool or instrument corresponds to the scientific in us and helps us to find answers to the question of the how of everything. So you try to answer these questions, and in doing so, you always come up with answers to the question, what does this mean for me? How can I integrate this into my life? Because if you are consistent, you try to translate your view practically of what you see as ethical and logical into your own life. Then you will also adjust your goals in life, act differently, feel differently, and even perceive differently. In other words, with the second way of looking at truth, increasingly broadening, you integrate the first way of looking at truth. But then you always elevate your own view. In short, your view of the elephant is growing. You experience that you don't have to be afraid of losing your footing when you question your own truth, because you receive a broader and deeper insight in return. And just as the image of the elephant shows, you get a broader view of reality much quicker when you go through this process together with others, and including their perspectives. In short, you bring your view of reality more and more in line with the truth or the reality. And this also provides you with an important key to distinguish facts from opinions and to prevent conflict and suffering. In this lecture we will give you an indispensable method for finding truth. A method which we will also use to practice in the workshop hereafter. Now you should not see this as just a method, because it is actually a universal cyclical process of finding truth, and in fact follows the evolutionary cycle of life. It is also a cycle in which you deploy the aforementioned three faculties or instruments to arrive at truth, and then in conjunction with each other. Your sense of unity, your insight, and your intellect. This method has been known since time immemorial, and can be found, for example, in the dialogues of Plato and in Theosophical literature. You start from one or more principles, as universal as possible. For instance, the concept of boundless truth that we have laid down in Lecture 1. This is not just a proposition to believe in, because a proposition is often so universal that it cannot be proven or refuted with our limited understanding. In mathematics, one therefore speaks of axioms. Now you can, of course, investigate the deductions or predictions from such a proposition and substantiate them with your own specific experiences and the facts that you observe, in order to test the universality of your assumptions. So if you experience that these deductions and predictions are substantiated in the practice of your life by your own experience, and if you can test them against proven facts, and if they bring you more insight, you can also apply them further in your life. Because the true school is always the practice of life itself. So what you do is, in fact, further internalize what your starting points are. You express the universal, but then in the specific situations of life. And if you then start living more and more according to that universal wisdom, you will broaden and deepen your understanding of it. In fact, the cycle then continues at a higher level each time. In all this, you always use your inner instruments, your sense of unity, your insight, or sense of interconnection and coherence, and third, your intellect. So this makes the process religious, philosophical, and scientific at the same time. It also resembles the scientific process, but with the important addition that we work with all our inner instruments and start always from the big picture. In science, too, you can see that the starting point is propositions and hypotheses. Although there are scientists who start from the most universal view possible and who intuitively search for integration and coherence, you see many scientific theories arising from empirical research, so more bottom-up. For example, on the basis of specific research data, let's say studied 100 swans, all of them white, a generalization is made. All swans are white. When several propositions are related, we call this a theory. For example, first thesis, swans are white. Second thesis, the color of swans is hereditary. And the theory could be then swans remain white. And on the basis of this theory, it is then predicted that only white swans will be born. But as soon as new research shows that a black swan has been observed, then the theory cannot be confirmed, and if the fact cannot be explained by adjusting the existing theory, then the old theory is rejected and a new theory is drawn up. So in this way, new theories are constantly emerging. And if the partial truths that are discovered are not linked to other scientific, philosophical, or religious partial truths, then a universal theory that provides conclusive answers to life's questions will not come any closer. Now, this is not the fault of science, perhaps even the least, for we all know examples of dogmatic religions and their fanatical followers. And the same goes for philosophies. Just think of a political philosophy, very dogmatic, like neoliberalism. But even in science, you see that some people elevate partial truths to absolute truths and start fighting other people's ideas instead of exchanging knowledge to arrive at a greater truth. And this leads to a lot of uncertainty for the average person. And this uncertainty causes many people to lose faith in experts and sometimes even to lose faith in the idea that there is truth after all. And when people lose faith in the existence and in the value of a shared reality, you see that people start to build their own greater truth from their partial truths, all people having their own theory, their own bubble. We can therefore conclude that it is of great importance to have a method with which you can independently arrive at the truth, but also that this method stands or falls with the basic starting points or propositions. To what extent are these ethical, universal, and logical? The question is then, are there not already a number of universal principles that have proven their worth over time? Can we recognize them, and are they worth relying on and building upon? Now, if you assume that there is truth, then it is only a small step to assume that there are also people who have already seen more of that truth. There are many examples of such people. People who were clearly ahead of the average man in terms of insight and who still know how to inspire us. Think of Gautama the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Plato, Jesus, Mohammed, and many others. And they also again pointed to beings who were still further in their development of consciousness. But to what extent did they speak of the same thing? Now, one of the more recent messengers was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who showed from 1875 onwards that the Theosophia, or universal wisdom, is to be found in the core of the message of all these world teachers, and that this wisdom, moreover, can be traced back to three universal propositions: boundlessness, cyclicity, and as above, so below. We will briefly touch on each. The first principle, boundlessness, and we actually already talked about this a lot at the first lecture when we spoke of an absolute truth or absolute reality that precedes everything. In Blavatsky's words, understanding this is beyond our thinking, but we can test the deductions with our inner instruments. The starting point, for instance, corresponds to our sense of unity and connectedness, because boundlessness means that nothing and no one can be excluded from it. And assuming boundlessness also ties in with the idea that there are no limits to what you can know. There's always room for wonder. The second proposition is that of cyclicity, that everything is cyclic, everything fluctuates, pulsates. But what is it that manifests itself cyclically? Here the secret doctrine introduces the concept of the monad, or divine spark. A spark of eternity or ray of boundless consciousness. A divine spiritual, eternal pilgrim who clothes himself again and again, cycle after cycle, in ever-evolving matter, and thus develops his boundless potential further and further. So everything comes from the same source, and the same potential resides in everything. And because all beings manifest cyclically, over and over again, they are all interconnected in eternity. We are continuously building on each other. And the idea of cyclicity is perceptible all around us. Think of the many cycles in nature and in our body. The alternation of day and night, ebb and flow, the seasons, etc. Now the third proposition describes the fundamental equality of all life. In short, as above, so below. Where the first proposition points to our boundless potential, the second that we develop this cyclically, the third adds the evolutionary process within a certain hierarchy of consciousness. We are always part of a greater whole and can learn from beings who came before us, just as we in turn can be teachers to beings who come after us. So growth is always a joint process. Every life cycle is in fact a collaboration of many beings going through their cycles of growth together. Just as cells go through their life cycles within the life cycle of a human consciousness, and we humans go through our life cycles within the life cycles of the earth and the sun. Now everyone can study these propositions and independently test these propositions. So we explicitly ask not to simply accept these propositions on faith, but to examine them for their ethics, their universality, and their logic, and test them against your own experience and the facts known to you. And this is a prerequisite for being able to use them to independently find truth about other issues. And even if you have built up confidence in these propositions, you will only come to a greater understanding if you continue to examine them and reflect on them. Again, it works to start from the idea that there is truth, that it can be found, and that it is more a matter of becoming aware of it, opening yourself to it. Because in essence, we are this truth. And just like exploring the elephant, it helps to do this with others. So we will do this in the workshop that follows now, and of which I.S.I.S will tell a little more. Thank you.